It's time to reboot your credit card with Apple Card. Other credit cards often charge annual fees for access to perks you might not even use, or they can come with restrictions. Apple Card gives you valuable benefits without annual fees. In fact, there's not a single fee at all. Apply now in the Wallet app on iPhone and start using it right away. Subject to credit approval. Variable APRs for Apple Card range from 15.24% to 26.24% based on creditworthiness. Rates as of January 1st, 2023. It's time to reboot your credit card with Apple Card. Other credit cards often charge annual fees for access to perks you might not even use, or they can come with restrictions. Apple Card gives you valuable benefits without annual fees. In fact, there's not a single fee at all. Apply now in the Wallet app on iPhone and start using it right away. Subject to credit approval. Variable APRs for Apple Card range from 15.24% to 26.24% based on creditworthiness. Rates as of January 1st, 2023.
The following podcast includes explicit language, but we assume that's what you came for. Hi, I'm Stefan Fatsis, and this is Slate's sports podcast, Hang Up and Listen, for the week of February 6th, 2023. On this week's show, Gene Demby of NPR's Code Switch podcast joins us to talk about the latest chapter in Kyrie Irving's soap operatic career, a trade demand met quickly by the Brooklyn Nets, who shipped the enigmatic superstar to the Dallas Mavericks. Gene will also be here to talk about the Super Bowl matchup between his Philadelphia Eagles and the Kansas City Chiefs, Tom Brady's retirement, and other NFL happenings. Finally, Sabrina Merchant of The Athletic will explain a crazy week in the WNBA, which saw two legends, Candace Parker and Breanna Stewart, form what sure look like super teams. Slate national editor Josh Levine is off this week. I'm the author of A Few Seconds of Panic, Wild and Outside, and Word Freak. I'm in Washington, D.C. In Palo Alto, California, it's Slate staff writer Joel Anderson, the host of Slow Burn Seasons 3 and 6. Hey, Joel.
Stefan, what's going on, man? Good to see you.
Got to quickly mention one thing from last week's show?
Yeah, sure.
Afterball, which you did not participate in, was about the full and total Americanization of Leeds United. Weston McKennie did debut for Leeds on Sunday, but they lost 1-0 at Nottingham Forest. And on Monday, Leeds fired its American coach, Jesse Marsch. Marsch helped save the club's ass last season, and the team actually was pretty good, I want to say, but not good enough to win more games. Blew a lot of scoring chances. That doesn't help a manager. They're on the cusp of the dreaded relegation zone in the Premier League. Oof. So ownership did what ownership does, throw the manager under the bus. It does suck for the American players, McKennie, Tyler Adams, and Brendan Aronson. And now, Joel, the speculation begins. Will Jesse Marsch be the next head coach of the U.S. men's national team?
Oh, well, I'm sure he'd love to take over that mess right now. From one frying pan to the fire, you know what I mean? But
it's not a super attractive job, as we discussed last week right now, but it could be if he doesn't get an offer quick from another European side, which he deserves, honestly. It could be where he ends up.
You know, one day, I promise, I'm going to find a team to root for in the Premier League, and I'm going to follow it. I know everybody, that's the thing. People were doing that like 10 years ago. It's probably my turn to catch up. We were just talking about how little pop culture I know, so I can't be behind on everything. So somebody's going to have to convince me of a team with the right origin story, the right fan base, and hook me up, and maybe I can get into it like everybody else.
There we go. Hang up and listen, listeners. Your mission, sell Joel Anderson on a Premier League team. In our Slate Plus segment this week, Gene Demby is going to stick around to talk about the NFL's Rooney Rule on minority hiring, which is the subject of an upcoming episode of Code Switch. To listen to that, you need to be a Slate Plus member. You get bonus segments on this and other Slate shows. You get ad-free shows, and you support this podcast. To become a member, slate.com/hangupplus. That's slate.com/hangupplus.
On Sunday afternoon, 5 days before the NBA trade deadline, we finally got the Shams bomb NBA fans have been waiting for since Kyrie Irving demanded a trade from the Brooklyn Nets last week. At 3:01 p.m. Eastern, Shams Charania tweeted this: breaking. The Brooklyn Nets are trading Kyrie Irving to the Dallas Mavericks for Spencer Dinwiddie, Dorian Finney-Smith, a first-round and multiple second-round picks, sources tell The Athletic. Thus put a close to Irving's time in Brooklyn, which ended after just 87 games played with all-star teammate Kevin Durant over the course of 4 seasons and 6 total playoff victories. Irving will move on to Dallas, where he'll team up with Luka Doncic and head coach and Hall of Fame point guard Jason Kidd. To talk about that, we're having on our friend Gene Demby. Gene is a co-host and correspondent of NPR's Code Switch podcast. Gene, how are you, brother?
What's good, y'all? I'm so glad to be here. It's so nice to be able to chop it up with y'all again.
I'm so glad to have you here. So glad. And in fact, I'm gonna do you a little bit dirty here. If I may, let me read Gene's response to the breaking news in our email chain on Sunday. JFC, which presumably stands for something we warned you about at the top of the show. Gene, what did you mean by that?
Oh my God, this dude. I mean, you just mentioned how few games he's played. Like, one of the things about Kyrie is, like, he obviously is a fantastic basketball player when he plays. This sort of, the way people are enamored with him, right? I think he was like the one of the leading vote getters in the Eastern Conference of the All-Star ballot. It's like completely theoretical. Like, ever since he's left Cleveland, since he played with LeBron James, all these teams have basically kind of gone all in on Kyrie Irving. And he has played, I think, something like 25% of the available games in the 4 or 5 years since he's left. As a Sixers fan, we've benefited from his Kyrie-ness, right? James Harden had a little bit of the Kyrie experience. It was like, I went out, and that was on the Sixers. He demanded a trade. But Kyrie is like just the most, he's a hotep, right? So like, and he has these sort of like hotep explosions, like every, 10 or 11 months, he just has to like do something bananas or say something like crazy, and then he blows everything up. He seems like a really bad teammate, and it's weird because his teammates never seem to think that about him, but he just seems to be somebody who is both like immensely talented and is never going to get his shit together. Like, is never going to be like able to like have all the bananas opinions he has, and also like be able to be a good teammate at the same time. It's just, it's always something with the dude, always something. And, then you think about sort of Brooklyn having this sort of like super team project, right? At one point, their team was James Harden, Kevin Durant, and Kyrie Irving. That's like, that team should get to the Eastern Conference Finals every single season that they're together. They won one playoff series, right, with that core. And it just like, and it all fell apart. And it fell apart because of him. Like, it's just, and watching this is like another team is basically taking a flyer on this dude, hoping that he can sort of like rein it in enough to be a guy who can get them over the hump. But like, that has never happened. It has legitimately never happened. So like, I have no idea why we're all still like caught in the sort of the sort of mythology of Kyrie Irving as this like, as this team changing in a good way, this like positive influence on team winning. I don't get it.
Well, people are blinded by his skill. When he plays, he's great. 25, 27 points a game. He works. He's an amazing basketball player. But he's also a pain in the ass. And, we mentioned how much he played. He played like just over half of the possible games with the Nets. And some of those were due to injury. But most of them were due to his refusal to get vaccinated for COVID-19. And then this year, he was suspended because of his anti-Semitism, promoting that documentary on anti-Semitism. Clearly, James Harden left because of Kyrie and demanded a trade, which was granted for Ben Simmons last year. Harden was asked about Irving's trade to Dallas. Did you see what he said? No. It's a trade that happened. And through all of this, it's the eternal optimism of the sports franchise, right? Of the sports team owner. We've seen people reporting, both Shams and Chris Haynes. Kyrie is ecstatic about going to Dallas, looking forward to joining up with Luka. The team feels like this is a good fit and the environment will be good for him. Based on what? He hasn't had a normal season since his last year with the Cavaliers, after which he wanted to be the man and insisted on leaving a partnership with LeBron fucking James.
Yeah. I mean, I think, so I do want to talk about the Kyrie-ness of it, right? Because obviously, this is the most unreliable alleged superstar in the league that I can remember since maybe Stefan Marbury, right? Well, like everybody was like, oh, Stefan Marbury is an all-star, but then he had like that freak out where he ate Vaseline on camera and then went to China, and then, he was never in the NBA again. And so
he's a legend in China, though, Joel.
Yeah, a legend in China.
Yeah, I mean,
he is. He may make the Hall of Fame based on what he did in China, right? But that's not Kyrie. And so I'm sort of surprised that there's still a market for his talent, because and we talked about this on the show, I thought we'd reached a point during the anti-Semitism scandal a few months ago that he was on his way out of the league, that was it, that teams were not going to be willing to put up with that. And I really underestimated how much 2 months of quiet and good ball would ease people's concerns about that. But my thing is that to me, this is an indication of how desperate the Mavericks are, man. You know what I mean? Like, and I think some of this goes back to Mark Cuban, and I don't know how much he internalizes criticism. I know he responds to it. I mean, he's still a sensitive guy. Like, he can say whatever he wants, but he's still a sensitive person. But people kept saying that they let down Dirk Nowitzki, that, they had Dirk for 21 seasons, and they won one title. They might never have a player as good as Dirk in league. I mean, they have Luka now, right? So I'm going to say that they have a player almost as good as Dirk, and those same concerns are coming up. And so I just think about like how Mark Cuban failed Dirk Nowitzki. Do you know who the only all-star to play alongside Dirk was after Steve Nash was traded to Phoenix in 2003? Do you know?
I want to say Michael Finley or Jason Terry?
No.
Wait.
No.
Oh my God.
You guys are going to be shocked. You're not going to even remember this. No.
Okay.
Josh Howard in 2007.
Oh my God.
Josh Howard in 2000. That's the only all-star to play alongside Dirk during his career after Steve Nash left, right?
Wow.
And now we're hearing the same stuff about Luka, who does not have another all-star caliber teammate. And they got rid of Jalen Brunson, right? They let Jalen Brunson go. So I'm looking at the Mavs, and I'm sure that Mark Cuban is like, I've got to do something. I've got to ease this burden on Luka, who right now is, his usage rate is, off the charts.
Astronomical, yeah.
Astronomical. I've got to do something. And so to me, this is as much an indication of how desperate the Mavs are as opposed to like any real market for Kyrie. Cause this is just them throwing something at the wall and saying, well, shit, let's just see if something works,
Yeah, like you said, like they've had a really hard time like wooing free agents. I remember there was a big thing when they were like trying to get DeAndre Jordan. There was a whole like all in for DeAndre Jordan. Like, oh, DeAndre Jordan, the dizzying heights of DeAndre Jordan. But
didn't they give JaVale McGee a lot of money?
Exactly, right.
Yeah.
In a weird way, I think like there's some things that Kyrie, again, everything Kyrie is like completely like theoretical, but like on court, defensively, they're going to be trash. Like, Kyrie and Luka as your backcourt are going to get toasted by everybody. But, like, you could see Kyrie is a fantastic shooter. I think he's a very underrated shooter. I think he shoots close to 40% for his career. I think he can play off ball with Luka. Luka has James Harden disease. He will not do anything if the ball's not in his hands. If he's not initiating, he's like, I'm just chilling over here in the corner or chilling at the top of the key.
I'm taking a break right now. Y'all go
exactly. It's like, I'm just going to stand here. But it doesn't seem like it's still even, like you said, Mark Cuban sort of throwing everything at the wall to see what sticks. It doesn't seem like this will be enough to get them over the hump. But what's interesting is like Cuban had been really vocal about things like, everyone on my team has to get vaccinated, right?
Everyone of my employees.
Exactly. Right, exactly. So how does that jive with, Kyrie, to my knowledge, do y'all know, like, he's never been vaccinated, right? I guess he doesn't have to disclose it at this point. But I imagine that had to be part of the calculation in him coming over, right? They had to be, because there's a good chance he could get to Dallas and be like, no, I'm not taking the vaccine. I'm not getting vaccinated. And he might very well, very quickly not end up playing for that franchise because of the Kyrie-ness of it all,
Right. I wonder if, and I guess we could look this up later. Somebody could tell us. I don't even know if that's part of like the league's mandate anymore, right? Like I feel like a lot of those, so a lot of that is out of the door. I mean, I guess if he gets sick, he still has to go through the league protocol, but you no longer have to take that shot. So, and not very many places in this country you can go better than Dallas to find the embrace of people that have concerns about the vaccine, right? So I think he's found a really good fit there. One other thing that I kind of want to talk about, and I want to see if you guys are with me on this. So Kyrie wanted to go to the Lakers. LeBron and others were openly courting, the idea of a Kyrie trade. Doesn't that to you show you how stupid and how bad the Lakers are run? Because allegedly, reportedly, Joe Tsai, the owner of the Nets, did not trade Kyrie to LA simply for the fact that he's like, that's what he wants. And I don't want him to go there. And it just seems to me, the Lakers have done this a couple times where they've like sort of called their shot. They did it with Anthony Davis and the league got mad at them. And it's like, it seems like eventually that that's going to turn on you, right? That that the teams in the league are not going to be excited about kowtowing to your demands or making it easy for you to do roster building at the expense of anybody else. And so like, it seems inevitable that that's the sort of thing that would happen. I just don't understand why LeBron, Rob Pelinka, Rich Paul, whoever didn't understand that we don't have to do this publicly, right? Like if you're going to get into the Kyrie business, which is, stupid on its face, but then to be so public about it, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
Mm-hmm. Well, but again, it's the short-term thinking, right? Right. Kyrie's an unrestricted free agent this summer. This is a rental, potentially. It doesn't sound like the Mavericks are going to even attempt to sign him during the season, and they're going to just push that off until the summer. From the Lakers' perspective, if LeBron wanted Kyrie, then LeBron wanted Kyrie because he's got a lot of spare parts around him that are not going to help that team get into the playoffs, let alone far in the playoffs at this point. They weren't, they were apparently the Lakers offered a couple of first-round picks 4 and 6 years out, but really didn't have much more that the Nets were interested in. And the Nets actually, this isn't a terrible situation for them. They could choose now to see what Kevin Durant's market value is before the trade deadline, or they could work with Durant to try to rebuild after the season is over. Kevin Pelton and ESPN gave the Nets a B+ for the trade and the Mavericks a D. Which gives you a sense of the sort of level of optimism on either side for doing this.
Yeah, you could sort of see, if you sort of squint, and again, I think falling into the Ben Simmons trap is not that dissimilar from falling into the Kyrie trap, but you could sort of see a world in which the Nets are still like a really good playoff contender. If a bunch of things break right, if Ben Simmons gets back to like 80% of who he was, they have really good players on that roster, right? A bunch of high-end role players. And, of course, if Kevin Durant is on your team, you have a shot at, like, just him going supernova and dragging you to a conference final. The Mavs, the West is just really, really, really difficult. And, like, to your point, it's a rental. I can't imagine, Kyrie is a 6'2" guard who is on the wrong side of 30, who comes with all of this baggage. He apparently is holding out for the Supermax. I don't know who is going to give that to him. He'll be hard pressed to get that money, even if he weren't Kyrie Irving with all of if he wasn't like an anti-Semite and an anti-vaxxer. Him asking for just the biggest bag possible would be a really tall order. And I can't imagine that he ends up getting the giant deal he wants. Then it seems like, just from some of the rumblings, that was part of what precipitated the trade, right? Was that like he wanted them to just give him the Supermax immediately, and they put some kind of stipulation on it, maybe like around whether the Nets won the championship or whatever, and they wouldn't extend it unless that happened. But it's not clear. Like with so many things with Kyrie, is like, why did this happen now? Like, why is this happening now? I just remember when he asked for a trade out of Cleveland. I think I was texting with Joel like then. I was like, what are you doing? Like, it was one of those things, you just won the champion. Like you're 18 months from winning the championship. What are you doing right now? And it was like, it didn't make sense then. And that was sort of the first sort of like really Kyrie-ish moment, right? It was like, when I was like, what is this cat doing? And now, like, with some like hindsight, right? Like a couple of years on, you're like, oh, that's just a Tuesday for him. It's like, I'm bored. Let me just uncork this grenade in the middle of the NBA season and just like, anyway, just what a head case, man. It just,
I can't think of a more appropriate idea that like his final game with the Nets comes against the Celtics, a team that he, went to, was supposed to have been the savior.
Said he wanted to stay. Said he wanted to stay. Yeah.
Goes there, is a total flop. And then as soon as he leaves, the year after he leaves, they go to the Eastern Conference Finals. And then, so he's playing that team in his final game with the Nets. And, Kevin Durant didn't play, but this is a chance for Kyrie to show up, show his leadership. I'm running the team, and they're down 39-9, within a few minutes. And I guess, as much as anything, few people or athletes make me feel like an old conservative man than the reverence for Kyrie. The dude don't show up for work. Mm-hmm. He's not enough of a plus player to make up for everything. And look, so I listened to ESPN Daily's recent interview with Myers Leonard, the former lottery pick in Miami Heat center who was suspended and then hasn't played in the NBA since he was caught using an anti-Semitic slur while streaming video games. He's, like I said, he's been out of the league for 2 years, part of it because of an ankle injury, but also because he's toxic in a lot of ways. And so now he's ready to return, and this interview happened, and it was published literally the day before Kyrie's trade demand.
Wow.
And near the end, Jeremy Schaap had said he worked out for the Lakers, and I was wondering, I was like, oh, were they just sort of testing in the waters? They're testing the waters for bringing in a notable anti-Semite? You know what I mean? Like, they were just like, well, they ain't saying nothing about Myers Leonard. You know what I'm saying? So maybe this Kyrie thing, and he might be able to help us. But I say this because I know that there are a lot of people that think that this is disloyal or whatever, but I literally cannot believe he was able to get through the anti-Semitic scandal. Like, he did not really, it was not a good apology. I'm sorry. And I think it is the prerogative of people in the league to not want to be affiliated with that dude anymore. And that people are still opening the door for him in spite of the fact, he's unreliable. He's just a dude who, I'm trying to use unproblematic language here, but he's unreliable. He's difficult to work with. And he was insulting in such a way that it demanded that he had to be suspended and did not really apologize. And here we are. A team is still holding out hope that he's going to be their savior. Mm-hmm. If I was Luka, apparently Luka gave the go for this trade, but that just is so stupid, man. If you're Luka, if the Mavericks really care about Luka and his future there, this just seems like the absolute wrong way to go about it. But, that's, everybody thinks that they're going to be the ones to get it right? Antonio Bryant was playing in the league like about a year ago. You know what I mean? after all the evidence to the contrary. So I guess this is just, another example of that.
On the other hand, Joel, we didn't even mention, Alex Kirshner tweeted and it blew up, sending Kyrie to the city where JFK got assassinated opens up all kinds of avenues for him to do exciting research. So there's that. All right, before we close out our NBA segment here, Gene, LeBron James, the anti-Kyrie in almost every way, is 36 points short of passing Kareem Abdul-Jabbar for the all-time NBA scoring record, which has been around for 39 years, 1984. Kareem, 38,387 career points. LeBron James is 38 years old. He's scoring 30 points a game. He is playing not that much differently than he played 10 years ago, 15 years ago. There have been modifications in his game for age, but goddamn, the respect that we should have for LeBron grows every game.
It's absolutely bananas to watch. He is averaging 30 plus points a game, right? Like, you think about if he just has like a sort of like regular fault, like sort of like downside of his career, whenever that is, when he starts to sort of decline in production, he might be able to play 3 or 4 years at like an all-star level at least, right? Like at least two more years at all-star level. He might fall off a cliff because he is like, pushing 40. But it feels like the NBA career regular season scoring record might be one of those unbreakable records when LeBron is done, right? Like, you have the NBA assist record, which belongs to John Stockton, and like LeBron is like 4th in assists now, and he's like a bajillion assists behind John Stockton. That one is never getting broken. But you got to think of all the things that had to happen to LeBron James over his career for him to get to this point. He basically had to not get injured. He never had any significant injuries until basically he became a Laker. Like, Kareem was averaging 10 points a game his last season. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, he sort of like limped over the finish line, right?
At age 42, right?
At age 42, right?
Right,
which is
Kareem
fair.
Didn't start until he had finished 4 years of college.
Absolutely, that's right. And so if you imagine, him as Lou Alcindor, they're coming into the league, he might have, like, Kareem was a monster. Like, he might have been like a legit, like, all-star level center just jumping into the league as an 18-year-old. Obviously, LeBron got a head start, but, maybe you have to find another high school player, it's like a straight prep to pro kind of guy if they change the rules. And then that person has to spend 2+ decades averaging more than 25 points a game and not getting hurt.
Unreal.
That seems
It's
Unreal.
insane.
Impossible.
It's insane. Rob Mahoney, Joel, had a really good piece in The Ringer about sort of looking at the unlikeliness of LeBron's achievement. And one point really stood out to me. He writes that over the last 4 seasons since James turned 35, the average NBA player has been younger than during any other stretch in NBA history. He's doing this against the youngest, most talented players in the history of the NBA.
Man, it's unreal. Yeah, I mean, I was a huge LeBron fan maybe a decade ago. My feelings on him have evolved. I have a lot of respect for him as a player or whatever. But yeah, man, I never thought that this would be a record that anybody would break. I mean, I think even the most optimistic projection for LeBron, like, it doesn't even touch this, right? Yeah, it's like, well, if he had Dominique Wilkins' career, we would have been like, yeah, that's
a great career. Yeah,
that's great. Yeah, he did great. He's going to be, but like, this is so far beyond any of that. And yeah, it's just, maybe even like 5 or 6 years ago, I was like, man, we better appreciate this dude while we still have him. And here we are. We're still saying it. I thought like we would be on the downside of that, and we're still doing that. And it's just unfathomable to think that not only is he breaking the record, that he broke the record, period, but that he's breaking it while averaging 30 points a game as a 38-year-old. Like, that's just, it's just unreal.
Yeah. I remember back in his back in the OKC days when Kevin Durant was just like on this tear. He was like super efficient. He was like putting together like 50, 40, 90 seasons. And it was like, people were sort of like, oh, if someone's going to break Kareem's record, maybe it'd be KD just because of the volume and the efficiency. And obviously KD has been basically hurt on and off for his whole career, right? And so it's like the giant thing is like, that's the thing that's out of your control. Like, obviously everyone sort of mythologizes LeBron's self-care and the way he like sort of rehabs and all this
spends $1 million on his body.
Exactly. Every year he spends $1 million. And it's like, yeah, even if you do all that, you got to get really damn lucky. You know what I mean? Like, so like, not only did he have to like put himself in a position to like stay on the court, he also just had to like not have anybody land on his foot the wrong way. You know what I mean? It's just, and the way he plays too is like just the kind of battering ram he was for so many years. It really is kind of hard to wrap your mind around.
In the next segment, we're going to talk about the Eagles-Chiefs Super Bowl with a couple of Philly guys. Hopefully they'll be unbiased.
When you're drafting your fantasy team, do you ever wish you could do the same thing with your business team? If you're building a roster to win the league, you need Indeed. Indeed is the hiring platform where you can attract, interview, and hire all in one place. Don't spend hours on multiple job sites looking for candidates with the right skills when you can do it all with Indeed. Find top talent fast with Indeed's suite of powerful hiring tools like Indeed Instant Match, assessments, and virtual interviews. Hate waiting? Indeed's U.S. data shows over 80% of Indeed employers find quality candidates whose resume on Indeed matches their job description the moment they sponsor a job. The right candidate is doing everything they can to find you, and if you use Indeed, you can be sure you're doing everything you can to find them too. Indeed knows when you're growing your own business, you have to make every dollar count. That's why with Indeed, you only pay for quality applications that match your must-have job requirements. Visit Indeed.com/hangup to start hiring now. Just go to Indeed.com/hangup, Indeed.com/hangup. Terms and conditions apply. Cost per application pricing not available for everyone. Need to hire? You need Indeed.
On Sunday, the Philadelphia Eagles and the Kansas City Chiefs will square off in Super Bowl 57 in Glendale, Arizona. The game will be the first time number one seeds in both conferences have played in a Super Bowl since 2018, when the Eagles won their first championship in franchise history over the defending champion New England Patriots. That's right, Gene. I see. A lot has happened since that matchup. The Eagles have almost completely turned over their roster since that day. Only 5 players from that team are on this year's team, including Lane Johnson, Fletcher Cox, who I swear had to have played for Jackie Sherrill at Mississippi State, and Jason Kelsey. The Eagles also boast a new coach in Nick Sirianni and a new quarterback in Jalen Hurts. Now, 5 years ago, the Chiefs were pretty much the same powerhouse that they are today. Kansas City is still led by Andy Reid and Pat Mahomes, who've advanced to the AFC Championship game every year since that year. So most odds had the Eagles as much as 2.5-point favorites over the Chiefs, but the Chiefs have surged back into the favorites role, with most bookmakers installing Kansas City as a point favorite. So, Gene, there's another historical angle to this game. It's the first with two black starting QBs in Hurts and Mahomes. As a lifelong Eagles fan, how meaningful is it that they're there? And are you surprised that it's Hurts that has led the Eagles here?
I'm just so happy that the long legacy of Rodney Peete is being remembered. Yeah, I mean, the Eagles have had some amazing black quarterbacks. I mean, Randall Cunningham, Mike Vick, Donovan McNabb is probably the greatest quarterback in the history of the franchise. Jalen Hurts he is not the sort of physical marvel that any of those dudes were. He's not that tall. He's kind of that rah-rah college guy. Like, I think he's like, how is the guy going to transition into the league? All that sort of rah-rah, go team thing. It's like really sincere, it's like deep in him.
Are you calling him Black Tebow? Are you calling him Black Tebow, basically?
He has some Tebow energy to him, right? I'm actually really surprised. I talked to a bunch of Eagles fans, obviously, through the years as they started like picking up, obviously they came out gangbusters. And people seem still really like ambivalent about him. Like, maybe it's like, I don't know, he's playing really well, but it's like small sample size. And at some point it's like, okay, this dude is probably the MVP this year. Like, how much sort of data do you need? And this is sort of the weird thing about NFL quarterbacks is like, if you're labeled, if you're sort of, he wasn't Mahomes, he wasn't a first round draft pick, right? Like, it takes a lot of things, you need a lot of rings and a lot of like records for people to sort of like disabuse themselves of the notion that you're not good. Especially, as you mentioned, like, if you're a black quarterback. Obviously, Mahomes is like in a different sort of category altogether. But, I think Jalen Hurts suffers from sort of like, third round draft pick, sort of that sort of initial branding, but also the sort of like, there's as we all know, like the sort of skepticism about black quarterbacks that extends like well into their careers, right? Even after they have like proven themselves, right? Like there was a period I was like, people don't talk about Steve McNair or Cam Newton as like these sort of the monsters that they were, right? Like, you hear more about, I don't know, you hear more about like Doug Flutie, you hear about, you know what I mean? Those guys like who had like way more success. But yeah, it's really fascinating to be here just a couple of years later, especially after, last year, just as an aside, like when Nick Sirianni had that initial press conference, I was like, oh, this is going to be, I don't know if y'all remember how bad that press conference was.
He was looking weird too, right? Like,
it was like, oh, this cat is like, out of his depth. And so it's for like 2 years later, one whole season later, for us to be like, in the Super Bowl was kind of bananas because I thought this cat was like, I was like, this is when people talk about the failures of the Rooney Rule, they're talking about this cat. When they talk about like nepotism and white dudes being elevated, it's like they're talking about this dude right here. So yeah, this is a very strange, surreal moment.
I think the thing that we should be appreciating more, Joel, about the black quarterback matchup in the Super Bowl, I mean, a couple things. One, that it's taken 57 Super Bowls to see this.
Amazing.
There was a good piece by Morgan Campbell for the CBC about how in the Canadian Football League, there was a matchup of black quarterbacks in their championship game, the Grey Cup, in 1981.
Right.
So, J.C. Watts and Warren Moon in that game. So it's taken a long
J.C. Watts.
time.
That J.C. Watts.
J.C. Watts versus Warren Moon. Just linger on that for a little bit. Anyway, go ahead.
Especially given where he went after his football career ended.
Absolutely.
But we should be looking at this more as a coronation this year. I mean, Brady's gone. Aaron Rodgers, gonna be gone. These are the best quarterbacks in football, and Patrick Mahomes is on his way to becoming one of the greatest quarterbacks in the history of football. And Jalen Hurts, yeah, you're right, Gene. This jury's still out. It's only been a few years for him. This is his first big accomplishment in the league. But we should be celebrating the rise of these guys as the face of the quarterback position in the NFL.
Yeah, the thing about Jalen Hurts that's really interesting to me, and I sort of mentioned, I always go back to Reggie McNeil, who was a star quarterback at Texas A&M. He's like a 5-star recruit in the early aughts. He was every bit as, probably even more highly than Vince Young at the same time. And he did pretty good at Texas A&M. And when it was time to go to the NFL, they made him switch to wide receiver and was drafted in the 6th round. This is 2003. So this is, just a generation ago. And the idea that somebody like Jalen Hurts, who, again, I mentioned this last week, I was at the championship game where he got benched at halftime for Tua.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it's just shocking to me that he's here. And I think the important thing about Jalen Hurts, because like Patrick Mahomes is his own deal. Like, I think his greatness is unassailable. If you're trying to argue anything other than we're talking about one of the best talents in the history of the NFL with Patrick Mahomes, and, I don't understand it. Like that to me, that conversation is fixed. But the thing about Jalen Hurts that's really important, I think here, is that it's proof that black QBs aren't fixed products. Like, so often we preclude the idea that guys can get better at like accuracy and ball placement and pocket movement. And his improvement has been every bit as impressive as Josh Allen's. Right? Like, Josh Allen had that one, like, it was like he was trash for like 2 years, and all of a sudden, you were like, oh, man, that guy put it together, And like, I'm hoping that that's a trajectory that we're going to see with Jalen Hurts. And the thing is, though, is that like, I don't think, like, it would make his legacy in some ways, even though like one Super Bowl win, like it can make you could either be like Trent Dilfer or like Joe Flacco. You know what I mean? Like it can skew your legend in one way or another. Like Aaron Rodgers is still riding off that one Super Bowl victory, right? But I think it's like more important for Patrick Mahomes' legacy overall, because Patrick Mahomes is playing against history now, right?
Yeah.
And that's why I hate to just say this in front of you, like Philly guys. You know what I'm saying? I just don't want to. But I think it's more important. I think it's more important for Patrick Mahomes to win on Sunday than it is Jalen Hurts. Because I think that no matter what Jalen Hurts is going to have to do it again for some people to believe that who he is. But like, for Patrick Mahomes and for me, I don't like dumb people to win arguments. Like, I don't want to deal with well, man, Patrick Mahomes, he's really, he's let down. He's only won one Super Bowl in the first 5 years. I kind of want to see Patrick Mahomes get this over the top, because I want people to finally engage with the idea that no, we're actually looking at one of the best guys who's ever done it.
I want to say that Philly, has its underdog reputation and belief, which I'll talk about in the Afterball coming up. But, Gene, Philadelphia's defense is really good. Kansas City's offensive line is one of its weak spots. Kansas City's defense is good, but Philadelphia's offensive line is outstanding.
It's amazing. Amazing, yes.
Philadelphia's got A.J. Brown. Philadelphia's got Devonta Smith. This does not feel like Chiefs easy. This feels like we could be looking at an incredible Super Bowl with Philadelphia maybe having some advantages.
I mean, a lot of advantages, right? I mean, obviously, the Chiefs, they're Andy Reid's teams. They put up a ton of points. They put up a ton of yards. They do all sorts of like weird stuff on offense. But yeah, their offensive line is weak. I mean, a lot of people were saying if you want a competitive Super Bowl, you should root for the Bengals, right, to come out of the AFC against the Eagles, just because they are a little bit more balanced. The Eagles seem like, like a really complete team. Excellent secondary, like a really good offense. Like you said, the offensive line is ridiculous.
Yeah, aren't the Eagles better than the Chiefs at pretty much every position other than quarterback?
Other than quarterback, yeah, that's right. Yeah. But Patrick Mahomes is so good. Is so good.
Maybe tight end too.
Yeah, and tight end. Yeah,
that's right. Fair point. Yeah, that was Goddard.
The Kelsey Bowl. But I do think that like, that is like part of the identity of Philadelphians, right? As sports fans, like I feel like we will talk ourselves into being underdogs, even though we have every positional advantage in this game. I just like, I imagine Boston fans felt like this, like in the early aughts before they started winning everything in every sport. Like they probably like, oh, we're, it sucks to be us, and then they started winning everything. Like, okay, we've been to the Super Bowl twice in the last 5 years. Like at some point you have to start to like, and also like the Eagles are like one of the most profitable teams. Like the idea that like the Eagles are like the Jacksonville Jaguars, right? Or like some team in a tiny market that's like just an upstarty team and not like this like massively popular, like revenue driving, like powerhouse of a team that is historically underachieved relative to being like, it's not actually a team full of like historically underdogs. It's like a team full of like historical, like sort of like never been as good as they should have been and like dropped the ball. Like I think we as Philadelphia fans, like fans of Philadelphia sports, might have to sit in the fact that like we just might be the shit. Like we might actually, our team might actually be like with no like qualifiers, right? Like we might actually just be the best team in football, right? Like the record, at some point you gotta look at this record of the season. Like this is not, it's the NFL. Like if you string together a season like this, like it's not just like smoke and mirrors, right? Like you have to get lucky, but it's not just smoke and mirrors. Like maybe we're just this damn good. You know what I mean?
Gene, you talking this shit. Okay, hold on. You and Stefan. So like you saying all this. So how confident do y'all feel going into the game on Sunday then?
Oh,
like,
I'm terrified.
Saying all
I mean,
okay.
I'm absolutely like, if we lost this, I'll be, yeah, that makes sense. Of course, that makes sense. Why us? You know what I mean? Like, of course. Like, I still distinctly remember where I was when we lost to the Patriots. When Donovan McNabb, on that last drive, where it's like I think it was like 2005, 2006.
Andy Reid clock management disaster.
Yes, Andy Reid clock management. And it was like one of those that felt like the most such a Philadelphia experience. Like, of course, this is what happens when we get to the Super Bowl, and we just fuck up in the last 3 minutes of the game, right? You know what I mean? And so, like, even when we won in 2018, it felt. Because first of all, that game was ridiculous. Like the whole time, it was like just like edge of your seat stuff. It felt like this giant sort of like exorcism. You know what I mean? And so at some point, you can't just keep having exorcisms. You know what I mean? At some point, like you beat Tom Brady, who beat you before, right? You're in the Super Bowl again for the second time in 5 years, right? You might have a second Super Bowl title in 5 years. I think people need to like relinquish. We need to like collectively do some.
Yeah, listen to my Afterball team. That's what I'm talking about. You're stepping on me. Should we talk a little bit about Tom Brady retiring? Do we care? Are we over it? Is it now, like give him his Hall of Fame ring and let's see if he can actually string 3 sentences together in the Fox booth?
So I'm going to say something. So I was listening to Nick Wright's podcast the other day, and he got deeply emotional talking about Tom Brady, like in a way that was like, oh man, I wish you all would listen to this. He started crying because he said,
Tom Brady.
Yeah, I mean, this is what he said. He said that because a lot of people made fun of Tom Brady for like, oh man, you gave up your marriage to go 8-9, And he said, but I think that the thing about Tom Brady, and he really got me thinking, it was that when you're great, when you're the best in the world at something, you feel an obligation to do it until you can't do it anymore. And he said, and so you're willing to put things to the side, like your family and everything else, because you've got this real serious sense of obligation to being great. And Nick kind of was comparing him, not a direct comparison to Tom Brady, but just like, I've pursued my career at detriment to like my family or whatever. And it really did kind of make me thaw a little bit. And especially when I saw the little video of Tom Brady on the beach and he gets emotional. And I've never been a Tom Brady fan. Like fuck that guy, right? But I can sympathize with the idea that, man, he was really great for a very long time. He did do things and give up things and sacrifice things that we probably will never know to do what he did. And now that it's over, it's just like, yo, man, that guy was sort of the center of the NFL universe for so many years. And now that he's gone, it's just like, man, it's just kind of sad. Like I just kind of now. If last year was like good riddance. This year I felt sad for him. And did you all feel any of that watching the video or watching him walk off the field? Because I didn't think I would ever feel sorry for Tom Brady. But I ended up there after this past week.
I think like LeBron, Gene, I think we can put Brady in the same context. Someone who vastly outperformed his body and logic of what we are told and what we know to be true about how long and at what level someone should be able to play American football. He was remarkable in that regard. Was he also crazy and did weird shit and TB12 and, his special pajamas and whatnot? Yeah.
But he was one of the first people to have a Make America Great cap out in public, by the way, too.
Right?
Keep that in mind,
But every one of our, and maybe LeBron's the exception here too, but every one of our greatest athletes or greatest anythings is a little bit crazy, right?
It's
you have
weirdo,
to be that driven and that motivated and that single-minded that you're willing to give everything up for pursuit of something that you're good at, but in order to be the one human being who's better than everybody else, you have to sacrifice. And that is worthy of respect. But yeah, he was still Tom Brady.
He's still Tom Brady. I mean, the weird stuff that sort of crept into our consciousness about the dude, like in the last couple of years, wasn't it like he wouldn't eat tomatoes or strawberries? Some red fruit.
He would eat strawberries or something too?
Yeah, something like that. TB12 says I can't do. It was this, he was a quack. He had a MAGA hat. There's a whole lot of stuff that comes with Tom Brady. That kind of stuff at least made him seem like a human being. But for most of the time, like, Tom Brady was like a sentient boiled chicken breast. Like he had he just like had no personality. I have no idea like how interesting he's going to be in his new Fox gig, right? Because it's like,
right,
who wants to hear Tom Brady talk about it? He has nothing.
Listened to an interview with Tom Brady and thought, I want to hear more of this guy?
He gives you nothing. He's just a complete...
what he's saying and the way he sounds?
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, so that kind of stuff at least made him seem like, okay, this dude has some quirks to him. But like, man, I'm glad he's gone. Like, I really like. Obviously he defeated us in the Super Bowl, and it felt like so many NFL fans were having a very different experience from the way the NFL media covered him. Right, like he was a villain for so many fan bases. Right, he was this person who vanquished their dreams. But if you like heard the way the fawning he got for the last 20 years, right, or at least once he sort of established himself as like a superstar. Like, it seemed like so out of step with the way we were experiencing Tom Brady. And so, like, I'm glad he's riding off in the sunset because I felt like it was worse to have this dude beat you and then have everyone be like, isn't he just 7th round draft pick? Oh, look at all the... Gio Carmazzi was drafted ahead of him. Gio Carmazzi, shout out to Hofstra University, my alma mater. Gio Carmazzi drafted ahead of Tom Brady.
Oh, yeah, shout out to Spurgeon Wynn, who I played against in high school, who was drafted ahead against Tom Brady. Yeah.
But I'm very glad to see this dude ride into the sunset. And honestly, not to be like, oh, like, I hope it's not too sanctimonious, not more sanctimonious than normal, but like, like as somebody like Joel and Stefan, like we're all parents, right? We have like families like that. It has rearranged my relationship to so many things, right? And granted, I'm not getting paid like $1 bajillion, but like, the fact that like his kids were growing up and he was just like, nah, I need to get one more ring. It's like, bro, you got 7 rings. Like, relax. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I feel so lucky that I get to like have the time I have with my child. Like, you know what I mean? Yeah. And I just know how precious those moments are. And I just, all right, like when you all right, you're gonna be rich as Croesus and your kid's not gonna talk to you, you know what I'm saying, when they're 30 because you weren't around and you have no relationship. I hope it was worth it. I hope that 6 and 7 ring was worth it, man. I hope it really was. Anyway, fuck that guy.
What a punctuation. So look, stick around for the bonus segment and we're gonna talk about NPR Code Switch's upcoming episode about the Rooney Rule with Gene. Gene, as always, my brother, thanks for joining us.
Of course, man. Of course. So good to be here.
In the next segment, we'll have Sabrina Merchant of The Athletic to talk about the new super team era of the WNBA.
Time to reboot your credit card with Apple Card. Other credit cards often charge annual fees for access to perks you might not even use, or they can come with restrictions. Apple Card gives you valuable benefits without annual fees. In fact, there's not a single fee at all. Apply now in the Wallet app on iPhone and start using it right away. Subject to credit approval. Variable APRs for Apple Card range from 15.24% to 26.24% based on creditworthiness. Rates as of January 1st, 2023.
This episode of Hang Up and Listen is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Most of you listening right now are probably multitasking. Yep, while you're listening, you're probably also driving, cleaning, exercising, or maybe even grocery shopping. But if you're not in some kind of moving vehicle, there's something else you can be doing right now, getting an auto quote from Progressive Insurance. It's easy, and you could save money by doing it right from your phone. Drivers who save by switching to Progressive save nearly $700 on average, and auto customers qualify for an average of 7 discounts. Discounts for having multiple vehicles on your policy, being a homeowner, and more. So just like your favorite podcast, Progressive will be with you 24/7, 365 days a year, so you're protected no matter what. Multitask right now. Quote your car insurance at Progressive.com to join the over 29 million drivers who trust Progressive. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and affiliates. National average 12-month savings of $698 by new customers surveyed who saved with Progressive between June 2021 and May 2022. Potential savings will vary. Discounts not available in all states and situations. The 2023 WNBA season opens on May 19th, but the date to circle on your calendar is June 29th. That's when the defending champion Las Vegas Aces host the New York Liberty. The Aces just added free agent legend Candace Parker to their already stacked roster, while the Liberty signed superstar Breanna Stewart, among other top players in free agency. The moves highlight the most frenetic free agent period in the WNBA's 26 years and reflect its ongoing operational maturity. Sabrina Merchant covers the W for The Athletic, and she joins us now. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so Breanna Stewart played her entire career up till now in Seattle, but chose to basically create a super team in New York, Sabrina. And Parker decided to complete a super team in Las Vegas. This league was built on equity and parsimony. Players had very little incentive or ability to chart their own course. What's changing?
Yeah, so I'm sure everyone's heard about the, big 2020 collective bargaining agreement that was announced on Good Morning America, a big win for the players. And the biggest part of that win for the players was the ability to make their own decisions in free agency. Prior to that, CBA, a team could control its best players' rights for about 11 years after they were drafted. So a player who was drafted at the age of 22 wouldn't be able to choose their own destination in free agency until the age of 33. And that's pretty much past your prime if you're a superstar. So now you see a player like Breanna Stewart, who was an unrestricted free agent last year, 6 years after coming into the league, ultimately decided to stay in Seattle last year, but then once again hit the market and chose to go to New York at the ripe old age of, 28. And that's the kind of age that you want a superstar at, right? It's not like you're courting someone who's past their prime. It's someone who's squarely one of the top two players in the league, if not the top player in the league. And that's just an opportunity players didn't have prior to this collective bargaining agreement. So I think we saw Candace Parker make that dramatic decision in 2021 to leave Los Angeles and go to Chicago. Her teammate Chelsea Gray obviously made a similar decision to go from Los Angeles to Las Vegas, Chelsea being a little bit younger, squarely in her prime. And then we see just a trend of that continuing throughout free agency over the last 3 years, culminating, I think, in this season where we have, the formation of a super team in New York. And then I would argue that the Aces were already a super team in Las Vegas and Candace Parker just added along to that. But yeah, this is definitely the greatest exercise of player empowerment that we have seen in free agency since the start of the WNBA. Now, previously players had the opportunity to demand trades, but obviously that, creates a situation for a team where you have to give up something to get the player involved. Right now we see New York just get Breanna Stewart and Courtney Vandersloot without giving up much of anything. So it's just an entirely different situation where super teams and player empowerment have kind of collided for the WNBA in a way that just hasn't existed before.
So, Sabrina, in the NBA, there's always this talk of how important it is for the Knicks to be good or at least relevant because it's good for the rest of the league. And I've seen you even say that it's good for business. And in some ways, I buy that. You want your big market teams out front if possible, but that's not what's happened with the Liberty. As you wrote, the Liberty don't have the decorated past of the other teams who remain since the 1997 launch. 3 finals appearances, which is more than I thought, but none since 2002, which is a generation, and no MVP winners in 26 seasons. So, Liberty owner Joseph Tsai, who's also the owner of the Brooklyn Nets, has clearly been desirous of building a winner there. So how much does it matter at all that Stewie and Courtney Vandersloot have gone there and the Liberty
and Jonquel Jones, and
Jonquel Jones, right, have gone there and the Liberty seem to be poised to be title favorites this season? Like, what does it mean for the WNBA if they have a good team, a notable team in New York?
Well, I think first of all, it's just such a good thing that there is a reasonable owner in New York as opposed to when they were just a sideshow of the Knicks and playing in Westchester County at a high school gym that seated about 1,400 people. So it's just nice that they're back in the city at Barclays Center, looking like an actual professional franchise. But, you look at the historic WNBA franchises, the ones that started the league, and all of them were pretty good when the league started, right? Like the Houston Comets, the Los Angeles Sparks, even the ones that have, now defunct. Like the NBA, when the Knicks are good, they drive ratings. When the Liberty are good, I would imagine that they drive ratings. Like Breanna Stewart didn't just choose to go to the Liberty because they had an opportunity to sign some players. She chose to go to the Liberty because it's in New York And when you're a player of Breanna Stewart's caliber with a signature shoe and all of the marketing opportunities that she has, that kind of matters more in New York than it does in other markets. And I don't think that was irrelevant to her decision to choose that team, to choose that market, to choose that city. Like, she said Stew York, right? Like, it's part of it. It's all part of the branding, the New York of it all, the liberty of it all. And I think it's very cool that, one of the original franchises is doing so well, because the WNBA doesn't do a great job of playing up to its history. But at the same time, like, the Liberty are important to the brand. Like, they were part of the very first WNBA game ever played. They won the very first WNBA game ever played. They were part of that game that happened at, was it Rockefeller Center? Like, they played on the stage that the same, Rockettes perform at. It's just nice to have that through line through WNBA history and to have a player of Breanna Stewart's caliber and consequence making her way there.
It totally matters. You're right. And this is a team that also has Sabrina Ionescu. I mean, that was, she was, when she came out of Oregon, this was the future of the league. Dynamic, aggressive, marketable, in New York star. And now there are all these complementary pieces around her and around Stewart, too. And let's also not forget that Breanna Stewart went to UConn. This is the East Coast is where she became famous and became a great player. The other piece of this, to me, Sabrina, is just how much attention free agency has driven to the league this year. I mean, you had Kevin Durant recruiting Stewie to come play for the Liberty. You had Kyrie Irving, after Breanna Stewart said that she would help the league find ways to get charter flights for all teams, which is something we'll talk about in a few minutes. But you had Kyrie Irving posting comments about this. I mean, there's a level of attention that the WNBA just hasn't attracted, thanks to the ability of these great players to determine where they want to play.
Yeah, I do think that Stewie did such a wonderful job of using social media to make her free agency, on the one hand, just very fun, like typing 14 emojis at a time and just letting the world try to decipher what she was thinking on any given moment. But then also making it purposeful, right? Like, when you have everybody already paying attention to you because of the emoji tweets, you can use that attention and leverage it to say, hey, like, this is what I actually want to get out of it. Like, while you're all here, let's talk about charter flights. Let's talk about the fact that it's kind of ridiculous that we play back-to-backs in Las Vegas and Phoenix and have to take, a Southwest flight from one city to the other and, like, either leave post-game, before finishing to make that flight, or fly the next day and then, playing a game that you're the same day that you're traveling. Like, nobody wants to do that. So I think it's really important that Stewie is pushing this issue forward, because it's just better for quality of play for the women to travel at this level. Like, the best college programs charter flights. Like, there's no reason why WNBA programs shouldn't be able to be on that same level. But I think it's really cool that Stewie was able to use her platform in such a creative and also impactful way in this free agency. Like, we just haven't seen that from a WNBA star before.
So, Sabrina, what happens to the Seattle Storm? They've lost Sue Bird to retirement, and now Stewie to free agency in consecutive seasons. Like, they surely understood there was a chance that they would lose here, but where do they go from here?
Yeah, that's a really good question. They have Jewell Loyd, the third piece of that big three that they had assembled, over the last 6 or so years, that was helping them contend for titles and helped them win 2 titles. Jewell Loyd, I could easily see being a scoring champion this year. She's a really good player, an Olympian, an all-star, like, not just a random person that Stewie is leaving behind in Seattle. But I also wonder, when you're a team like the Seattle Storm, who's just been built on number one picks over the course of your history, like Sue Bird was a number one pick in 2015, Jewell and Stewie were back-to-back in 2015 and 2016, you kind of need that star talent to take you back to the promised land again. And in WNBA, tanking is a little bit more challenging, because the loss totals that they calculate for the lottery are collected over 2 seasons, not just one. And Seattle obviously had a very successful season in 2022. So they can't just tank their way back to the bottom in one season. But, if Jewell Loyd has eyes elsewhere, maybe this is a time you consider trading her, capitalizing on her value as best as possible before she's stuck, helming a team that maybe not that good. And the 2024 WNBA draft is projected to be awesome. Caitlin Clark, Paige Beckers, Cameron Brink, Angel Reese, like Kayla Van Lith, the list goes on and on and on. Like, I'm very excited for this upcoming draft, but there is superstar potential up the wazoo for this 2024 draft. And I think that the smart teams who have found themselves in the very, very crowded middle of the WNBA landscape should really consider just punting this year and giving it a shot next year.
This year is going to be the return of Brittany Griner after her detention for 9 months in Russia. And this goes back to this charter flight question and what the league is going to do to accommodate Griner. It seems that if Griner were allowed to fly privately, which she probably will have to do, the league's going to have to do something about this. And this has been an issue now for a couple of years. You mentioned Joe Tsai earlier, Joel. He was fined $500,000 for chartering flights during the 2022 season. Howard Megdal had a long takeout about, and really like crazy story about this issue for Sports Illustrated last year, in which he reported that Tsai also flew the team to Napa for a vacation in 2021. So there are these new owners, Sabrina. Tsai has a ton of money. This is a guy that is a billionaire. You've got Mark Davis in Los Angeles, who is building this juggernaut with the Aces, who want to spend money, versus a lot of the old line WNBA owners, whether it's the NBA teams that have not really cared too much about their WNBA subsidiary, or other owners that don't have that kind of money. Are we heading for a sort of are we in a period of sort of ownership disagreement inside the league? And how do issues like the charter flights get resolved?
Yeah, I think we're already there. Like that piece that you mentioned from Howard and SI about the travel issue, like there were owners who were furious with Joe Tsai, who wanted to like consider the Liberty not being able to play in the postseason that year, or like even have their franchise status in jeopardy because of just, oh my God, a heinous thing of like treating players like proper professionals,
terminated.
Right? Yeah, it's crazy to think about. And there is a dichotomy between these new owners like the Mark Davises and Joe Tsais of the world, and even Larry Gottesdiener in Atlanta, who just recently purchased the Dream. We've got new ownership coming in Phoenix and Minnesota, who also own their NBA teams and also fantastically wealthy. But there are older owners who have been in the league for a very long time, like the Seattle Storm ownership group or the Chicago Sky ownership group, who just aren't on the same monetary level as those billionaires. And I do think that it's good for these newer owners to push the league forward as much as possible, because there's been like a period of stasis in the WNBA. Like they've existed at 12 teams for over a decade. It was previously at 16 teams. Like this is a contraction from what the league used to be. And if there are people with money who want to do things to make the lives of the players better, who make the lives of the league better, I think that's something that definitely should be explored. And it's interesting because Kathy Engelbert, the commissioner of the league, appears to be on the side of the older owners in, preferring a more calm approach, more like, let's see how things happen. Let's not try to push things forward as much as possible. Like, let's make sure everyone is ready to play before we make this funding model that we can't sustain any longer. So I do think it's quite interesting that we have so many vocal owners, not just like people with money, like Davis and Tsai are loud about the things that they want to do, right? Like Joe Tsai, violated the terms of the CBA to charter flights. Mark Davis has just been a little bit more careful about it, where, he buys the middle seats in between where his players are sitting so that they don't have to sit next to anybody, which is technically within the rules. And it's just another way that he can use his money to make their lives a little bit better. He's building this practice facility in Las Vegas, which is the only WNBA dedicated practice facility in the country, which is very cool. So I think it's just really important for the league that they have these individuals who are just saying, hey, like there's little workarounds that we can get through to try to use our money in the best way possible. And eventually we're just going to break everybody else down and make it so that if you have money, you have a competitive advantage. And I think we're already seeing that pay off, right? Like, even though this is a hard cap salary league, the fact that the billionaire owners or, the most vocal owners in Joe Tsai and Mark Davis are the ones who have collected the greatest assortment of talent, I don't think is an accident.
So, I read your story about Stewie's recruitment, and you mentioned in there that a number of WNBA teams went over to Turkey to help recruit her. And it got me thinking about these two, concurrent phenomenons, these new owners with money, as you mentioned, and then what happened with Brittany Griner and fears about playing in Russia and overseas during this time. So I'm just sort of wondering if any of those things, like these, these developments in the league, are affecting the way players look at playing overseas now, or that owners are able to recruit and say, we'll treat you so well that you ain't even got to go overseas anymore. Is that on the table at all? Have you heard anything about that?
Yeah, so the WNBA has, created a few off-season programs that allow for players to make money if they stay in the States, when the season is not happening, like there are these marketing deals they could engage in that pay them about, up to $250,000 per season. There are individual team marketing deals that pay them money on top of that. So there is, potential to like make, a real salary as a WNBA player, even if you don't play overseas. This season, I believe the fewest number of players have gone overseas compared to like the last 10 years. And that's a consequence of several things. There's just like pandemic fatigue. There's also, hey, one of our players got detained and was, stuck in Russia for a year almost because she had to go overseas. There really aren't any WNBA players who have gone to Russia. There is one first-round draft pick from 2022 who didn't actually end up making her team, but she is playing in Russia, which honestly makes me think that her agent didn't do such a great job of finding her a spot. But the market for overseas teams is kind of different than it was even a year ago because of the war, players can't go to Russia. Because of COVID restrictions, players can't go to China anymore. And that's two of the biggest financial draws for WNBA players overseas. So even though they're going to places like Turkey, like it's just not the same financial advantage that it used to be compared to WNBA salaries and what they could get, just doing sponsorship deals and like hanging out at NBA All-Star Weekend. Like the money is not as dramatically different as it once was. And I think that that's important for the W because you want to have the ability to showcase your players as much as possible so that when the season's happening, it's like, oh yeah, I remember her. Like she was in the skills challenge or whatever, with NBA players on such and such date. I do think that even though the WNBA set this hard line with prioritization of, we're going to, not allow you to play in the WNBA if you're unavailable by the start of training camp in 2024, like it's in the best interest of the European teams and the WNBA teams to work together on this because neither of them can afford to lose one another. The Euro League is populated by a bunch of American players. And like, you can say that they could do just fine with like only European players, but hey, the best team in Turkey has Breanna Stewart and Courtney Vandersloot and like, Satu Sabali. So like, maybe they need us too. And I think even if it was kind of this like hard line that they set in terms of, we're not going to give you any of these greater benefits unless you agree to prioritization. Ultimately, it's kind of what the league needs to move forward and create a bigger footprint in the U.S.
Sabrina Merchant covers the WNBA for The Athletic. Great to have you come on the show, Sabrina. Thank you so much.
Yeah, anytime.
It's time to reboot your credit card with Apple Card. Other credit cards often charge annual fees for access to perks you might not even use, or they can come with restrictions. Apple Card gives you valuable benefits without annual fees. In fact, there's not a single fee at all. Apply now in the Wallet app on iPhone and start using it right away. Subject to credit approval. Variable APRs for Apple Card range from 15.24% to 26.24% based on creditworthiness. Rates as of January 1st, 2023.
And now it is time for Afterballs, sponsored by Bennett's Prune Juice, endorsed by Kenny Sailors, who says it was okay. So today's Afterball name, look, this upcoming Super Bowl pairing has kicked off a round of celebration and commemoration for the first ever matchup of two black quarterbacks, Jalen Hurts and Patrick Mahomes, as we mentioned earlier. In honoring those two men, there's been some nostalgia for Doug Williams' iconic and history-making victory in 1988, which is, God forbid, now 35 years ago. Williams' MVP performance in that victory over Denver was an achievement that in some ways was an inflection point for black quarterbacks in a league that had notoriously been hostile to them. The league rarely afforded legitimate opportunities for star black quarterbacks in college, often forcing them to change positions. Oh my God, just Reggie McNeil. This just always still makes me mad. Or opting to make a name for themselves in the Canadian Football League. And it's how I came to know of Warren Moon, who showed up in Houston after helping lead the Edmonton, then named Eskimos, to a record 5 consecutive Grey Cup victories. He showed up in Houston in 1984, and I was never the same, and neither was my football team. But I hadn't known that Warren Moon wasn't the first great black QB in the CFL to win a Grey Cup. A decade earlier, there was Chuck Ealey. Ealey went undefeated as a high school quarterback in Portsmouth, Ohio, but was lightly recruited and signed with the University of Toledo. As a starter at Toledo, Ealey and the Rockets went, and this is in 3 straight seasons, 11-0, 12-0, and 12-0. They finished those seasons ranked number 20, number 12, and number 14 in the country. Ealey was named first-team All-American by Football News, but finished 8th in Heisman voting in his senior year, way behind the winner, and my former college football coach, Pat Sullivan of Auburn. Ealey finished his career as a 3-time first-team All-Conference selection, leading the conference in passing yards in 1970 and 71. His jersey is one of 4 retired jerseys in the history of Toledo football, and he was elected to the MAC Hall of Fame and the College Football Hall of Fame. All that, I just gave you his resume. Entering the 1972 draft, his agent advised teams to leave him alone if they didn't plan to play him at quarterback, and so the NFL left him alone. And he signed with the Hamilton Tiger Cats of the Canadian Football League. He then proceeded to lead Hamilton to an 11-3 record in first place of the East Division. He ended up winning the CFL's Most Outstanding Rookie Award and was named to the CFL All-Star team. He also went on to help the Tiger Cats win the Grey Cup, passing for 291 yards and a touchdown and rushing for 63 in the championship game. I mean, come on, man. Those are today's numbers back in 1970s. Anyway, his career didn't last too long in CFL. He was injury plagued, and by 1978, he was out of the league because of a career-ending collapsed lung. But, look, he's a legend up there still. He's 73 years old, lives in Ontario. That's a guy that we should be remembering today. So, look, Stefan, what is your Chuck Ealey?
Well, the Eagles in the Super Bowl means one thing. Stories about how, no matter how many greased light poles fans climb after a big win, Philadelphia is an underdog town. This trope dates back decades in sports to the scrappy underdog Philadelphia Flyers, who brawled their way to back-to-back Stanley Cups in the 1970s, and not in sports, maybe all the way back to the 1770s. Who can say? Actually, the local paper, the scrappy underdog Philadelphia Inquirer, can. From serving as the birthplace of a revolution launched by rebellious traders to continually being compared with New York City and D.C., Philadelphians have long viewed themselves as underdogs, and we like it that way, Inquirer reporter Stephanie Fall wrote before the Eagles' first playoff game last month. Doubt us? Go ahead. Underestimate us? Find out what happens. Don't like us? We don't care. Don't mess with Philly, yo. Farr led her piece with Eagle center Jason Kelce's F-bomb-filled speech at the team's Super Bowl victory parade in 2018. Dressed as a mummer, Kelce said that every Eagles player, coach, and front office executive, many of whom he called out by name, was an underdog.
And you know who the biggest underdog is? It's y'all, Philadelphia. For 52 years, y'all have been waiting for this. You want to talk about an underdog? You want to talk about a hungry dog? For 52 years, you've been starved in this championship.
You know what's up.
Everybody wonders why we're so mean. Everybody wonders why the Philadelphia Eagles aren't the nicest fans. If I don't eat breakfast, I'm fucking pissed off.
His voice is incredible. A Philly singer named Matt Santry released a song before that Super Bowl that was titled Underdog's Time Is Now, Philly Fight Song.
We're here to make Philly proud. Disrespect fuels us now. Just look around. The underdog's time is now.
5 years later, the existential crisis's time is now. With the 14-3 Eagles seated number 1 in the NFC, Farr wrote, "It's a strange place for Philly to find itself, on top with the odds in our favor, and we are feeling all kinds of ways about it." Actually, it's not at all a strange place for Philly to find itself. Sure, the Flyers and 76ers' last titles were in 1975 and 1983, respectively, but overall, since 1980, when the Phillies, Eagles, Sixers, and Flyers all made their finals, and the Phillies won it all, Philadelphia teams have reached 20 major sport finals and won 4 championship trophies, 7 if you include Villanova men's basketball, which won the NCAAs in 1985, 2016, and 2018. That's not terrible at all. I mean, Super Bowl 57 is the poor, bedraggled city of brotherly love's 3rd final in the last year. The Phillies made the World Series, and while locals won't fall through the roof of a bus shelter for it, the Major League Soccer team, the Philadelphia Union, reached its title game. New York, its 10 teams have been to 1 final in the last 7 years. The underdog story is, at this point, as overworked as a Ben Franklin impersonator. And deep down, Philly knows it. After the Super Bowl win over the Patriots 5 years ago, the same Inquirer, now agonizing over the city's identity crisis, declared that identity crisis dead and buried. There comes a time to hang up the underdog masks, the paper said in an editorial. Disrespected, unappreciated, chip on Billy Penn's shoulder, Philadelphia is too good a narrative to just give up. And woe to an outsider who tries to explain it too. Last week on Twitter, Stephanie Farr, the Inquirer reporter, complained that the New York Times did a wither underdog Philly story after she had done hers. They even interviewed the same expert, she wrote, and cited all the ways the Times story reflected, big city snootiness that doesn't get Philly's blue-collar jawn. She signed off, "Thanks for the sincerest form of flattery, gray lady." The Times piece was written by Jeree Longman, who, in addition to being one of the best sports reporters of this or any generation, has lived in Philadelphia for 40 years. He worked at the Inquirer for more than a decade, covering the Eagles and Sixers. He even wrote a book about the frustration of Philly sports fans titled, "If Football's a Religion, Why Don't We Have a Prayer?" The expert that Longman supposedly poached from the Inquirer? It's Joel Fish, a sports psychologist who's worked with Philadelphia teams for decades. The Inquirer has quoted Fish more than 100 times in the last 35 years. Jeree Longman first quoted him about rowdy fans at Eagles games in that paper in 1989. He's also quoted Fish a half dozen times in the New York Times. Farr sniffed that Longman's story traded on Philly cliches because it mentioned the shop-worn anecdote about Eagles fans throwing snowballs at a guy dressed as Santa Claus at a game in 1968. Quote, "In Philly sports lore, the infamous snowballs at Santa Claus incident practically feels like yesterday," end quote. Oh, wait a minute. That's not from Longman's piece, which actually explains how Santa getting pelted with snowballs is mistakenly used as an example of Philly fans being mean. No, that's the first paragraph of a story published 2 weeks ago in the Philadelphia Inquirer. Don't get me wrong, I love Philly. I'd happily move back to Philly. I love my Quakers, but the Eagles can win the Super Bowl 52-3. And the city will continue to portray itself as a bunch of gritty, ruffian battlers that no one else believes in or can possibly understand.
Stefan, this is really interesting because, first of all, I just have to say, I've never met somebody from Philadelphia that I don't like. Okay. It's a remarkable thing. I've always thought that, I have kind of the vibe of Philly. Like I could live there. I thought it was really fun when I lived on the East Coast. I could visit there. But if Philadelphia thinks it's an underdog, what city is a champion city? Like I know Boston had that run, right? For a little bit. And I guess maybe LA, but even though they get basically double the opportunities because they've got two teams in every major sport. So they have double the opportunity to win championships. But other than that, who do they think is out here winning all the championships then? This is just happening to Philly. Don't you think Cleveland gets to feel like underdogs or, Baltimore or I don't know, New Orleans? Has New Orleans ever won shit? They won the Saints won a championship in 2010 and that's it. Who gets to be the underdog here,
Yeah, there's actually, there are lots of websites you can consult where people have compiled this. And the one I was looking at has Philly as the 11th most successful sports city of the last 50 years, which,
nice.
That's not so bad.
Who's else is on that list? I just wanted real quick, who you got?
Yeah, I looked at a website called Champs or Chumps, which rates success over the last 20 years for total championships. LA is number one.
Of course.
And not just championships, but success rate. It's champ score per team. They got some sort of metric here. So Phillies comes in at 11. New York is 15.
Okay. All right.
You want to be Oklahoma City, Charlotte, Sacramento, dead last at 53.
This is what I'm saying. There's some fans
Chicago,
in some cities.
24. Dallas, 23. Miami, 22.
It is shocking to see Chicago so down bad. Because when I was growing up, I mean, to say nothing of the Bulls, the Bears were good,
Yeah.
White Sox are pretty decent. Oh, well. Yeah, man. Philly, you guys got to get over that, man. You have a really nice city. Like visiting there. Good people. Good sports teams. You don't have a lot to complain about, I don't think.
That is our show for today. Our producer is Kevin Bendis. To listen to past shows and subscribe, go to slate.com/hangup, and you can email us at hangup@slate.com. And please subscribe to the show and rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. For Joel Anderson, I'm Stefan Fatsis. Remember Zelmo Beatty, and thanks for listening.
Hey everybody, it's Tim Heidecker. You know me, Tim and Eric, Bridesmaids, and Fantastic Four. I'd like to personally invite you to listen to Office Hours Live with me and my co-hosts, DJ Doug Pound.
Hello.
And Vic Berger.
Howdy.
Every week we bring you laughs, fun, games, and lots of other surprises. It's live. We take your Zoom calls.
Music.
We love having fun. Excuse me?
Songs. Vic said something.
Music. Songs. I like having fun. I like to laugh. I like to meet people who can make me laugh. Please subscribe